I'm 36 years old, and if you asked anyone who knows me, they'd probably say I've always been careful. Careful with money, careful with people, careful with my heart. I wasn't the guy who jumped headfirst into relationships. I thought that made me smart. I thought it meant I'd never get played. And then I met her. She came into my life like a storm, loud, dazzling, impossible to ignore. At first, it felt like a blessing. She was everything I thought I wanted but never believed I could actually have: confident, magnetic, someone who walked into a room and made it hers without even trying. Everyone noticed her. Everyone admired her. And when she chose me, I felt like I had won some secret lottery. She knew exactly what to say to make me feel special. "You're different," she'd whisper. "Not like the others." Those words were addictive. She gave me fire I didn't know I was missing. Midnight calls, spontaneous trips, the kind of passion that burns too bright to last but makes you believe it will anyway. At first, my friends envied me. My parents were stunned. "She's incredible," they said. And I believed it. God help me, I believed every word. But even in the beginning, there were cracks. The jokes that cut a little too deep. "You're lucky I even put up with your clothes. Don't laugh so loud, it makes you look desperate. You should be grateful I make you look better." She'd always laugh after, tilt her head, and say, "Relax, I'm kidding." But I'd feel it, the sting, the little seed of doubt she planted with every line. At first, I told myself it didn't matter. Every couple teases, right? Every relationship has its sharp edges. And besides, the highs were intoxicating. When she wanted to, she could make me feel like I was the only man alive. But late at night, staring at the ceiling with her breathing steady beside me, I'd remember her smile. That smile wasn't sweet. It wasn't warm. It was sharp. Calculating. Like she wasn't just looking at me, she was studying me. Testing me. The first real alarm came when she started disappearing. At first, it was harmless. Drinks with friends. Late nights at work. Yoga classes. Always with a story, always wrapped in that confident tone that made me feel foolish for even questioning. But then the patterns started to show. Times didn't match. Details slipped. And when I asked innocent questions, she didn't reassure me. She smirked. "You're not jealous, are you?" she'd ask, her eyes gleaming. "That's so insecure. Don't ruin this by being weak." I told myself I was overthinking. That's what she wanted me to think. But in the back of my mind, a voice whispered, "She's not careless. She's deliberate." And maybe the most terrifying thought of all came to me one night, as I watched her sleep peacefully, her lips curved in the faintest smile. What if this isn't just a relationship? What if it's a game? The more time passed, the harder it became to ignore the cracks. At first, they looked like harmless imperfections, the kind of flaws you forgive when you're in love. But soon, they became patterns. And patterns don't lie. It started with her friends, or at least, the friends she claimed to have. She'd disappear for hours, saying she was helping Katya through a breakup or meeting Oksana for wine. But whenever I casually asked about these women, she'd wave her hand, change the subject, or laugh in my face. "Why do you care? They're my friends, not yours." One evening, she came home glowing. Not the tired glow of someone who spent hours consoling a heartbroken friend, but the radiant shine of someone who had been adored. Her makeup was fresh, her perfume strong, her smile too wide. When I asked how Katya was, she blinked for half a second too long before saying, "She'll survive." "Why do you always doubt me?" Then she laughed, kissed me, and walked away as if nothing had happened. The teasing grew sharper too. "You really think you're funny? Cute. You're smart, in your own way. Not real smart, but enough for me. Honestly, without me, nobody would even notice you." Always said with a smile, always followed by that infuriating laugh. And if I dared to protest, she'd tilt her head and say, "Oh, calm down. Can't you take a joke?" But a joke doesn't linger in your chest like a bruise. A joke doesn't echo in your head at 3 in the morning when you're staring at the ceiling, wondering if she's right. She started criticizing my friends more openly. Why do you hang out with them? They're all losers. Don't you get it? They drag you down. And little by little, I found myself canceling plans, making excuses, isolating myself. It wasn't even her demand, it was the way she said it, the way she made me feel like I should be ashamed for wanting to see people who had been part of my life long before she showed up. The world was shrinking. It was just her and me, caught in her gravity. Then came the disappearances I couldn't explain away. She'd say she was at yoga, but her mat was untouched in the trunk of her car. She'd claim she was having drinks with coworkers, but there'd be no group photos, no messages from anyone else. Just her smirk when she came home late, glowing, humming, looking at me like she was daring me to ask. And when I did ask, gently, carefully, she'd pounce. You're paranoid. Do you want to ruin this? Do you want to be the kind of man who spies on his girlfriend? The way she said it made me feel small. Like she had flipped the script, turned me into the villain for even daring to notice. But the worst part wasn't the lies, or even the cruelty. It was the look she gave me after. That sharp, hungry look. She wasn't just hiding something. She was enjoying it. Testing me. Watching me squirm, cataloging every hesitation, every weak smile, every time I swallowed my words. One night, as we lay in bed, she whispered into the dark. You know, sometimes I think you'd completely fall apart without me. And honestly? I want to see it. I froze. What do you mean? I asked. She giggled softly and rolled over. Relax. I'm joking. But I knew she wasn't. And as I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to her steady, peaceful breathing, I realized something terrifying. She wasn't careless. She wasn't sloppy. Every lie, every slip, every cruel little joke was deliberate. She was pushing me. And the question that kept me awake until dawn was simple: how far does she plan to go before she decides to stop? I always swore I would never be that man. The one who snoops through his partner's phone, who digs through purses, who second-guesses every excuse. That was weak. That was paranoid. That was exactly the image she painted of me every time she smirked and said, "Don't be so insecure." But the lies had been multiplying. The timelines never matched, the details slipped too easily. And her expression whenever I caught an inconsistency, that sharp little smile, like she was enjoying my confusion, it pushed me past my breaking point. One night, after she drifted into her calm, steady sleep, I lay beside her, staring at the ceiling. Her phone glowed faintly on the nightstand. I stared at it for what felt like hours, my heart pounding so loudly I thought it would wake her. Finally, with shaking hands, I reached for it. Her passcode? Her birthday reversed. Too easy. Too deliberate. Like she wanted me to open it. The screen lit up, and with it, the truth. At first, I tried to tell myself I wouldn't find anything. That I was crazy, that I'd only see harmless messages. But within seconds, my stomach dropped. Threads of conversations with names I didn't recognize. Men's names. Some saved with emojis, hearts, flames, little winks. Daniel. Mark. A single P red heart. My hands trembled as I scrolled. Flirty messages. Late night arrangements. Compliments about her smile. Inside jokes I'd never heard. One line hit me like a knife. He suspects, but it's fun. He won't leave. He's too weak. And her reply. Of course he won't. He needs me more than I need him. I think he likes the pain. My chest tightened. I kept scrolling, even though every word cut deeper. There were photos too. Not explicit, but intimate enough. Glasses of wine clinking. Her smile glowing, brighter than I'd seen in months. Her leaning in close to a man's shoulder, his arm just barely in frame. A hotel lobby. A restaurant I'd never been to. Different men. Same pattern. Same game. I placed the phone back exactly where it had been and lay stiff in the dark. She stirred, rolled toward me, and draped her arm across my chest. My body froze. And then, as if she could sense it, half asleep, she whispered in my ear, "You'll never leave me." "You can't." Her words crawled under my skin like poison. Did she know I had looked? Or was it just another perfectly timed dagger, meant to pierce me in the dark? The next day, she was radiant again. Coffee brewing, humming softly, moving around the kitchen like she was untouchable. She kissed my cheek, asked about my plans, and smiled as if the night before had never happened. But I couldn't stop. I needed more. Not just texts. Proof she couldn't twist. That evening, while she showered, I searched her desk. Receipts, bills, papers scattered carelessly, or maybe planted, like everything else. And then I saw it, a slim black notebook, tucked deep in a drawer. My hand shook as I opened it. It wasn't a diary. It was a record. A log. Page after page, all about me. Confronted me about perfume. Denied. Reaction, frustrated but apologetic. Good. Asked again about yoga. He hesitated. Perfect. Next step, mention Daniel. Watch carefully. My blood ran cold. She wasn't just cheating. She was documenting me. Studying me. Every reaction, every doubt, every hesitation reduced to a note in her twisted experiment. I wasn't her partner. I wasn't even her victim. I was her subject. The sound of the shower stopped. Panic surged through me. I shoved the notebook back into the drawer and returned to the couch, pretending to scroll my phone. She walked in minutes later, hair damp, skin glowing, and scanned me instantly like she always did. Searching for cracks. Searching for evidence of what I had seen. She smiled faintly, poured herself wine, and sat across from me. "You look tired," she said softly. "Long day?" "Yeah," I forced out. "Just work." Her smile sharpened. She leaned closer, eyes locked on mine, and whispered, "Sometimes I wonder how far I can push you before you finally snap." Then she sat back and sipped her wine, her eyes never leaving mine. That night, as she slept peacefully beside me, her breathing slow and even, I lay awake with one thought pounding in my head. She wasn't careless. She wasn't clumsy. Every lie, every slip, every cruel little test was deliberate. She wanted me to break. And I was starting to wonder, what happens when I finally do? I couldn't carry it anymore. The texts, the photos, the notebook where she wrote about me like I was some kind of experiment, it all spun in my head until I felt like I was suffocating. I told myself I'd stay calm, that I'd confront her without rage, without shouting. That if I spoke with control, she wouldn't be able to twist it back on me. That maybe, just maybe, I'd finally see guilt in her eyes. So I waited. That evening she came home late again, perfume heavy in the air, a fresh glow on her cheeks. She tossed her bag on the chair, smirked, and started humming like nothing was wrong. But I was already at the table. And her notebook was there too. She froze for a split second, then smiled wider. Not surprised. Not scared. Like she'd been waiting for this. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering. She poured herself a glass of wine and sat down across from me, calm as ever. "About what?" she asked, tilting her head. I pushed the notebook toward her. "About this. About the lies. The perfume. The names. The way you've been testing me." Her eyes flicked down at the notebook, then back up at me. And she laughed. Loud, sharp, mocking. "So, you've been snooping. Congratulations. You've just proven everything I wrote." "I've been surviving," I said, forcing my voice flat. She leaned in, her eyes glittering. "Surviving? No. You've been paranoid. Obsessive. Creeping through my things in the middle of the night. Do you hear how insane you sound? That notebook is proof. Not against me, against you. I clenched my fists under the table. It's proof you've been studying me like a lab rat. Every reaction, every word. That's not love. That's cruelty. She sipped her wine slowly, savoring the moment, and set the glass down with a click. And if it is? If I was testing you, pushing you, seeing how much you could take before you cracked? Maybe I enjoyed it. Maybe I still do. The real question is, why are you still here? Why can't you walk away? Her words sank deep, like knives twisting. She wasn't denying it. She was admitting it, flaunting it, because she believed it didn't matter. You don't get it, do you? She whispered, leaning closer. Even if you tell someone, even if you show them everything, who will they believe? You? The shaky boyfriend with paranoid eyes? Or me? The calm, charming woman everyone adores? For a moment, I couldn't breathe. She was right about one thing, she had rehearsed for this. Every possible move I could make, she'd already written into her script. But I stood up, lifted the notebook, and tucked it under my arm. Maybe you're right. Maybe they'll believe you. But lies rot. And when they do, your mask will crack. For the first time, I saw it, a flicker in her eyes. Doubt. Fear. Just for a second. I walked toward the door. Behind me, her voice followed, soft and poisonous, "You'll come back. You always do." I didn't answer. But her words echoed in my head all night, wrapping tighter and tighter, "You'll come back. You always do." After that night, after I laid her notebook on the table and she laughed in my face, something inside me shifted. For months I had been reacting, stumbling, dancing to her rhythm. She pushed, I bent. She lied, I doubted. She smirked, I crumbled. But that night, I understood something I should have known long ago. The more I fought her directly, the stronger she became. She had rehearsed for every scenario. If I shouted, I was unstable. If I begged, I was weak. If I tried to leave, she'd whisper just the right words to reel me back in. She had written the script and cast me as the fool. So I decided not to act in her play anymore. The next morning, I smiled at her. I kissed her cheek when she poured me coffee. I listened to her casual lies, her little digs, and I gave her nothing in return. No anger. No suspicion. Just calm. Just silence. She thought she had one. But behind that silence, I was building my game. I bought a second phone. She didn't know about it. On it, I began recording everything. Her late-night calls where she bragged about how close I was to breaking. The whispered threats she muttered in the hallway when she thought I couldn't hear. The nights she pretended to be scared, screaming at nothing, while her phone just happened to be recording. I photographed the roses, the scarf, the watch she left behind like props on a stage. I scanned her notebook page by page. I backed it all up in the cloud, on a hidden USB, even locked away in a safety deposit box. If she wanted a war of perception, I was building an arsenal of truth. Meanwhile, I perfected my mask. When she came home glowing from her yoga class, I asked about her day with a gentle smile. When she left her phone face up with a string of hearts lighting the screen, I didn't flinch. When she leaned close and whispered, "You don't even care anymore, do you?" I kissed her forehead and said, "Of course I care." But my voice was calm, too calm. And that calmness unsettled her more than any explosion ever could. The provocations grew bolder. One night she came home with lilies, dramatic and fragrant. She set them in the vase, watching me carefully. "Someone gave me these. Don't you want to know who?" "They're beautiful," I said. "I'll change the water tomorrow." Her jaw tightened. She slammed the vase down so hard water spilled across the table. "You're pathetic," she screamed. "You don't even love me." I cleaned up the spill in silence. She stood there trembling, waiting for me to react. I didn't. Another time, she left a gold watch on the nightstand. I picked it up, turned it in my hand, and placed it back without a word. She was watching me like a hawk. Well, aren't you going to say anything? Nice piece, I said calmly. Expensive. She grabbed it, threw it into her purse, and stormed out of the room. But the moment I knew the tide had turned came late one night. I overheard her in the kitchen, her voice sharp, frustrated, almost desperate. He doesn't react, she hissed into the phone. I've tried everything. Nothing works. He just stays calm. A pause. Then, quieter, it's boring now. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, and for the first time in months, I smiled. Because in that one word boring, I heard the truth. She wasn't winning anymore. She was starving. But I also knew starving predators are the most dangerous. And if she felt the control slipping, she would escalate. So I stayed quiet. I stayed calm. And in the shadows, I sharpened my knives of truth. The war wasn't over. It was only beginning. She knew. Not in a single moment, not when I first slid the envelope across the table, but gradually, step by step, in the subtle changes of my behavior, in the way I stopped taking her bait, in the silence I began wearing like armor. What she always mocked as doing nothing had become my strategy. And it was this silence that changed her, not by making her weaker, but by making her more dangerous. At first, the escalation was subtle, like a paper cut. She began planting rumors. Casual lines at dinners with friends, he's been acting strange lately, almost like he's losing his mind. Smiles dropped in the right ears at parties. Messages whispered to acquaintances who then exchanged uneasy glances when they saw me. She knew exactly who to target so the doubts would spread to co-workers, neighbors, even the barista at my favorite cafe. Small drops of poison, invisible at first, but together forming a stain under the carpet. Then came bolder moves. She started staging uncomfortable conversations in public, while I was within earshot, as if delivering verdicts and waiting for others to accept them as truth. He's been so tense lately, she said lightly during one dinner with my friends. I saw the flicker in their eyes, that spark of suspicion. These weren't casual remarks, this was a performance, carefully rehearsed and executed, a play in which she already knew everyone else's lines. The most terrifying part was how she learned to cover her tracks better than ever. Before, her props were obvious, the roses, the scarves, the watches she left out like clues. Now it was subtler. A postcard without a signature. A receipt for a taxi ride. A bill for a late dinner at a restaurant she'd never been to with friends. Each piece was a stitch in her mask, invisible to outsiders, but glaringly obvious to me. And then she crossed into new territory. She didn't call the police yet, not directly. Instead, she invited in support. A lawyer who was a friend of a friend. Someone from a local committee concerned about neighborhood safety. They didn't come with accusations. They came with smiles, pamphlets, friendly questions. We just want to make sure everything's okay at home, they said warmly. But their eyes betrayed them. They'd already heard a version of the story, the one she had carefully crafted and fed to them piece by piece. Their questions were framed to cut off my answers, to make doubt bloom where it hadn't before. I replied calmly, without theatrics, but I could feel the dust settling around me. Every one of these concerned visits, every whispered question, it all built her web. And the more I stayed silent, the stronger she grew. Her cruelty was no longer confined to me. She was extending her reach outward, reshaping the environment, bending it to her will. By poisoning my reputation, she made me more dependent on her. That was the genius of it, not hitting me directly, but stripping away every support around me until she was the only one left standing. One night I came home to find her sitting in the living room surrounded by papers, pamphlets, notes, even printouts of my late-night phone calls. How she got them, I'll never know. She looked at me the way someone looks at a test subject. Do you see, she said, spreading the stack in front of her. People are worried. It's not just me imagining things. This is reality. Her voice didn't shake. It was calm, steady, triumphant. I felt something else, something sharp, something cold. If I let her continue, she wouldn't just take me down inside these walls. She'd erase me outside of them too. And then her story would be irreversible. So I stopped. Not by screaming. Not by violence. Not by giving her the scene she wanted. I did the last thing she expected. I started acting openly, legally, methodically, without emotion. I collected everything: recordings, screenshots, photos, her notes, and stored them in places she couldn't reach. I made copies. I shared facts quietly with people who could help, not rants, not outbursts, just documented truth. I started talking with a lawyer, with friends who could tell fact from theater. And she noticed. Her attacks grew more aggressive, more desperate, because she sensed something shifting. She saw that I wasn't alone in this anymore. That others were starting to question her narrative. She tried to shove me back into the corner, to bait me with insults, with tears, with her signature smirk. But the tide had changed. Her power had always lived in performance. Mine lived in evidence. And with every fact I laid down, her mask cracked a little more. I began to see it in her eyes, the fear I'd only glimpsed once before, when I first showed her the envelope. Only now it was deeper. She realized her territory was shrinking, and for the first time, she was the one running out of moves. I didn't know how this war would end. But I knew one thing: I had finally turned her game against her. And she hated me for it. The police visits, the rumors, the staged scenes, she thought she had cornered me. But what she didn't know was that I had been preparing. Every whisper, every late-night phone call, every cruel note in her notebook I had copied, stored, backed up. She thought my silence meant weakness. In reality, it meant patience. One evening, she came home late, glowing in that same way that used to crush me. Perfume heavy in the air, her phone buzzing on the counter with names I didn't recognize. She poured herself wine and leaned against the counter, smiling that razor-sharp smile. "Long day?" she asked sweetly. I nodded. "Not as long as yours is about to be." Her brow furrowed, just slightly. I pulled an envelope from the drawer and slid it across the table. She opened it slowly, her smile fading as she flipped through the pages. Inside was her own handwriting, the notebook she thought I hadn't seen. Page after page of my reactions cataloged like I was a science project. Then the transcript of her late-night call: "He's calmer now. Next week we'll have enough. I'll file, and it'll be clean." And finally, photos. Her, laughing with other men, her hand brushing against theirs in restaurants she told me she never went to. Her fingers tightened on the papers. For a moment, her mask slipped. "You've been keeping score," she whispered. I leaned back, my voice steady. "No. I've been surviving. But now it's your turn." She laughed, brittle and sharp. "This proves nothing. You sound paranoid. Obsessed. All it shows is you spying on me. Nobody will believe you." I took out my phone and pressed play. Her own voice filled the room: "He'll crack soon. I can't wait to see it." Her laugh followed, cruel, undeniable. The silence afterward was like a punch to the chest. She set the papers down, her hand trembling, her eyes burning into mine. For the first time since I'd known her, she had no rehearsed line. I stood, tucked the envelope back into my bag, and said, "Even if I disappeared tomorrow, your mask would still fall. Because this time, it's not my words against yours. It's yours against yourself." She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. And in that silence, I knew the power had shifted. After that night, something changed in her eyes. The smirk was still there, but it didn't feel as sharp anymore, more like a mask glued to her face, hiding the cracks underneath. She knew I had proof. She knew her little performance, the notebook, the late-night calls, the staged mistakes, all of it could turn against her. But instead of retreating, she escalated. It started the very next day. She came home, phone in hand, and didn't bother hiding the messages this time. She placed it on the counter, screen glowing with a man's name and a trail of heart emojis. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "He makes me feel alive. Something you've stopped doing." She waited for me to explode, to scream, to take the bait. Instead, I smiled faintly. "Good for him," I said. Her eyes narrowed. She slammed the phone down so hard the sound echoed through the kitchen. You don't even care. Do you hear yourself? You're pathetic. But I saw it, that flicker of frustration, that tiny flash of fear. Because I wasn't playing her game anymore. The provocations grew more vicious. A man's jacket appeared on the back of her chair. A lighter in her purse that wasn't mine. One evening she even walked in with a bouquet of roses, placed them in the vase, and said, "A friend gave me these." Don't you want to know who? They're beautiful, I answered calmly. She grabbed the vase and hurled it against the wall. Shards of glass scattered across the floor. You disgust me, she hissed. You're nothing without me. I knelt, collected the shards in silence, and said softly, "Funny." I was about to say the same thing. Her face twisted with rage. But the real escalation came a few nights later. I came home to find her sitting at the table with her phone propped up, recording. Papers spread neatly in front of her. She jumped up the moment I walked in, shouting, "Stop yelling at me. You're scaring me." But I hadn't said a word. I walked over, picked up the phone, stopped the recording, and pressed play. My calm breathing filled the room. Nothing else. I placed the phone back on the table. "Nice try," I said. For the first time, she looked shaken. Truly shaken. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat in the dark living room, glass of wine untouched, staring out the window like she was recalculating every move she had left. I watched her reflection in the glass, and for the first time, she didn't look like a queen on her throne. She looked like a cornered animal. But I knew better than to think it was over. Cornered animals are always the most dangerous. And the war between us wasn't finished. It was only just beginning. I knew the moment had come. For months I had let her dictate the rhythm, let her spin her stories, let her believe she held all the power. But the truth was different. Every cruel word, every staged accident, every whispered threat, I had documented it all. She had been building a case against me, but without realizing it, she was also building one against herself. That evening she sat at the table waiting for me, her phone propped up like always, recording. Papers lay spread in front of her, affidavits, drafts, little pieces of fiction where I was the paranoid, unstable man. She smiled as I walked in, sipping her wine like a victor awaiting her prize. "Sit," she said. "You should see what your reputation looks like on paper." I didn't sit. I pulled out an envelope from my bag and placed it on the table. Her smile wavered. "What's this?" "Your reputation," I said. She frowned but opened it anyway. Inside were copies. Her notebook entries, where she described me like a lab rat, confronted me about perfume. Denied. Reaction, frustrated but apologetic. Good. The transcript of her late-night call, "He'll crack soon." I can't wait to see it. Photos of her with men she swore didn't exist. And finally, a USB drive labeled simply, "Her voice." Her hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. "You've been keeping score," she whispered. "No," I replied calmly. "I've been surviving. But now it's your turn." She tried to laugh, sharp and brittle. "This proves nothing. People will think you're obsessed. You're paranoid. You spied on me, that's all they'll see." I pulled out my phone and pressed play. Her own voice filled the room, echoing against the walls, "He'll crack soon. I can't wait to see it." Followed by her cruel laughter. The silence that followed was suffocating. She set the papers down slowly, her eyes locked on mine. For the first time, she had no rehearsed line, no clever retort. Finally, she stood, pacing the room. Her voice shook as she hissed, "You won't dare use this. You don't have the guts." I picked up the envelope, tucked it back into my bag, and looked her dead in the eye. "I already have," I said. "There are copies. Safe. Even if I disappeared tomorrow, your mask would still fall." She froze. Her lips trembled, but no words came. And in that silence, I realized the game had shifted. She wasn't the puppeteer anymore. She was the puppet, tangled in her own strings. That night, she didn't smirk. She didn't taunt. She sat in the dark, glass of wine untouched, staring out the window with wide, hollow eyes. For the first time since I had known her, she wasn't the one pulling the strings. And for the first time, I felt free. But I knew this wasn't the end. Cornered predators don't give up easily. The final act was coming. And I was ready. After I laid the evidence in front of her, after her own voice echoed through the apartment and shattered the mask she had worn for so long, everything between us changed. The silence that followed was no longer hers. It was mine. For the first time since we had met, she wasn't in control. But I knew it wasn't over. Not yet. People like her don't surrender, they fight until their last breath, until there's nothing left to burn. And I had to be ready for her final act. The next few days were like living on a fault line, waiting for the earthquake. She no longer bothered with the little games, no jackets left on chairs, no strange gifts, no fake friends' names. Instead, she prowled the apartment like a shadow, restless, calculating, her eyes sharp and hungry. And then came her final attempt. One night I came home and found her sitting at the table, perfectly dressed, hair flawless, makeup immaculate. Her phone was propped up in plain sight, recording. She jumped up the moment I stepped inside, her voice shrill, frantic. "Stop yelling at me. You're scaring me." But I hadn't said a word. I walked calmly to the table, picked up her phone, stopped the recording, and pressed play. Only her voice filled the room, her shouting into silence. Her face went pale. I placed the phone back on the table. "It's over," I said quietly. "You don't control the story anymore." For once, she didn't argue. The next morning, she started packing. Quietly. No drama. No screams. She folded her clothes with precision, slipped her jewelry into cases, lined up her cosmetics neatly like a soldier preparing for retreat. When she zipped the suitcase and rolled it to the door, she finally turned to me. Her eyes were sharp again, but not confident, desperate. She forced a smile, the same poisonous smile that had once hooked me. "You'll miss me," she whispered. "When the silence gets too loud, you'll wish I was here." I didn't move. I didn't answer. She opened the door, and for the first time in months, the sound of it closing behind her didn't crush me. It freed me. The apartment was silent. Truly silent. But it wasn't the silence she had used to punish me, to make me doubt myself, to make me feel small. This silence was different. It was mine. I sat at the same table where she had once laid out her lies and where I had laid out her downfall. And I realized something simple: monsters don't always vanish in fire or fury. Sometimes they just walk out the door, dragging their poison with them. And all you're left with is quiet. She was wrong. I wouldn't miss her. Because silence wasn't my prison anymore. It was my freedom.